of Diabol Diabetes Dialogues. This is an episode where we talk about diabetes with a special guest today. We have Dr. A.G. Unikrishnan. He is one of the top endocrinologists in India, and he's also the CEO of Chelaram Hospital in Pune. Welcome, doctor. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation's meeting.
So welcome Dr. Unni Krishnan. Thank you for taking out time to have this discussion with us. So for the audience, the topic that we are going to talk with Dr. Unni Krishnan today is weight management and diabetes. And we'll be covering both weight gain as well as weight loss issues for people who are living with diabetes. So I'll directly jump into the questions that we have. So we'll just cover the basic general questions first. So when we talk about considering obesity, so there are two words that come into our mind, which is overweight and being obese. So are these two words, the meaning is same or are they different?
Well, so when you look at excess body weight, you call excess body weight or excess body fat as obesity, but mild degree of weight gain that isn't normal, yet isn't enough to be classified under the category of obesity, is called as overweight. Now, overweight varies from country to country. For example, if you take the Western population, they classify a body mass index of, say, more than 30 as as obesity, and they look at a body mass index of somewhere around uh, 25 to 30 as being a little overweight. Some populations say that 27 kilogram per meter square should be overweight. So I suddenly realized that I'm talking to people with diabetes and people with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So I'll just talk about the body mass index. The body mass index is a simple measure, which is the weight in kilogram divided by height in meter the whole square. So if somebody mass index is more than 30 internationally, uh, we say that people are obese, but people are now saying that Indian people should be classified as obese even at lower degrees of body mass index.
How would you say should one manage obesity with diet and exercise? It's one of the most commonly asked questions in the diabetes community, and we would love your inputs.
So if you ask me personally, we'll have to look at diabetes type 1 and type 2 separately and then look at the weight gain in both. So let's look at type 2 diabetes, which is the common form of diabetes associated with obesity. Now, my basic belief, it may be, I call it belief because it's more of a belief, is that a lot of type 2 diabetes can be controlled with simply diet and exercise. So if you look at the weight per se, weight can be controlled by diet. Now, unfortunately, weight cannot be really controlled by exercise. Uh, Weight maintenance is possible by exercise. So the best way to control type 2 diabetes and weight is to diet. When we talk about diet, we are generally talking about a lower carbohydrate diet. I hope you noticed the subtle terminology that I used. I didn't use the word keto diet. I didn't use the word low carb diet. I used the word the lower carbohydrate diet. That's because it varies. Our food habits are ingrained from us from childhood. And it may not be ideal to make a drastic change because food contributes to a lot of things beyond weight. It contributes to satisfaction, satiety, happiness, a lot of things, quality of life. So a lower carbohydrate diet is the best way to lose weight in a type 2 diabetes subject person. And once the person has lost weight, to maintain that weight loss, that's where exercise comes into play. But if you look at glucose control, both diet and exercise will help in glucose control. But for weight loss, it's only diet, and for weight maintenance, it's mainly exercise. As they say, you cannot outrun a bad diet. So, diet control is probably
Right.
the key. Now, you asked the question about diabetes in general. So, I want to focus on type 1 diabetes as well. So, it's not that type 1 diabetes people do not have obesity. Type 1 diabetes is generally thought to occur in thin people, but a lot of type 1 diabetes people uh, also complain of weight gain. Yes, to some extent that may be because of insulin, because um, just to recount a story which I'd seen a child almost 15 years ago with type 1 diabetes and was on an insulin pump. uh, that child was in a very difficult family circumstance. The family circumstances, the dynamics weren't optimal, and therefore the child was extremely worried and stressed out. So the child was actually eating a lot of food and taking a lot of insulin, and as a consequence, he put on a lot of weight. And then with just good counseling, it actually got better. So yes, people with type 1 diabetes gain weight because of excess insulin and excess calorie intake. But remember, type 1 diabetes is something that happens in the background of the rest of the genetic profile. So if there is a genetic tendency to obesity and that person gets type 1 diabetes, when you correct that type 1 diabetes with insulin, the person is going to put on weight. For that, those people also, I personally feel that a lower carbohydrate diet is the way to go. You can increase the fat intake, the protein intake, but a lower carbohydrate, but not going too low, because that increases the risk of ketone body production. Not going too low would be the right approach. Of course, I haven't talked about medicines, but that's a whole different thing. Type 2 diabetes,
Yes.
there are medicines, that there are injections which help in weight loss. A lot of options for type 2 diabetes in terms of medications. But for type 1 diabetes, it's mainly insulin, diet, and exercise in general.
Thank you, doctor. That was a really, really very clear and concise answer. And I just want to reiterate because a lot of people ask us this. Like Dr. Unikrishnan mentioned, you cannot outrun a bad diet. So just want to reiterate that diet is the key thing, followed by exercise, of course.
And it's proper amalgamation of everything. Like you cannot just skip diet and just work out a lot and expect the weight loss, and maintenance is another thing that a lot of people face issues with. So another thing, when we talk about weight, the things that come to our mind is maybe it's genetic or stress related. So how do we deal with that?
So yes, the classic example I give is the example of the science of the midnight snack. So whenever almost every person has been watching a TV program or streaming a program, and late at night, and then you are hungry and you open the cupboard or the refrigerator and you find something to eat and have eaten it. So that's called the science. I call it the science of the midnight snack. What happens is when you are stressed out, it could be a major stress in life. It could also be something as simple as getting stressed by watching some highly emotional scene on a TV, or while watching a cricket match where it's raining sixes and fours, or wickets are falling in an IPL match, or something like that. So, whatever stress it is, stress releases what are called stress hormones. Stress hormones, you must have heard of adrenaline, that's the number one stress hormone. The second is cortisol. Cortisol is also a stress hormone. There are other stress hormones also. What these hormones do is that they are a protective mechanism for stress. So the first thing in stress is these hormones increase your heart rate, increase your BP, and therefore you require more energy. So you immediately start feeling hungry. And when you start feeling hungry, you tend to eat. So that's one of the reasons why you get up at night after watching something, binging something on a TV, and then you go and eat something, and then that contributes to putting on weight. Uh, so yes, stress because of the hormonal release increases your appetite, and we need to be conscious about it. You cannot escape from stress. Stress is an intrinsic part of our lives, but you can, to some extent, control your response to stress. And I believe that stress reduction is very, very important for weight management. The other side is also true. Many people are not aware, but problems like anorexia are also becoming common in modern society, where the stress takes a different form. The stress takes some sort of an abhorrence towards food, and you have the opposite happening, severe weight loss, and a sort of distaste for food. So I think it's a mixture of both. Some amount of appetite is important, but too much uh, because of stress or too little because of stress can actually be harmful. So I want to highlight to the audience that eating disorders are something which are not easily recognized and often overlooked among people.
Thank you, doctor. That's a great point there. So traditionally, obesity is connected with, like you mentioned, type 2 diabetes. People, associate these two things together. But in the case of type 1, also often we are realizing now in the last few years that the incidence of obesity is going up, and it's also many times linked with the insulin resistance in type 1s, which was generally not seen earlier. So, what is your opinion on that?
So many years back, this has been noticed many years back because a lot of in olden days, when the type 1 diabetes subject became obese, people used to attribute it to excess fat deposited in the liver. So that used to be called, there are syndromes where that used to be called. But now in today's modern era, I believe it's a mixture of three things. The first thing is what you may not be able to fully control is your constitution, your tendency to obesity, which may be familial or genetic. The second thing, as you said, which we could control is the environment, the stress that needs to be controlled. And the third thing, which could be fine-tuned, is the very fact that in a type 1 diabetes, you really don't have insulin. And therefore, you are either injecting insulin or giving it insulin with a pump. So remember that insulin injection or even the insulin pump may not be able to precisely mimic the insulin production patterns in the body. So because of the difference between how the body makes insulin in a very fine-tuned manner to how an insulin is injected, means there is a gap. But certainly insulin injection is life-saving. But if you look at the insulin pump, it's a little more precise than insulin injection, but it isn't as precise as the body's production mechanism. So yes, then the next stage is the artificial pancreas, so on and so forth. We are getting there. But at this point of time, I think it's important to realize that all insulin injections do have a limitation. For example, let's take the simple human regular insulin. Now, let's assume the time is 1 o'clock. And let's assume that I'm going to eat my lunch. I have to take my insulin injection. If it's a regular insulin, I have to take it at 12:30 or 12:45, and that injection
Correct.
is going to last for about 4 to 5 hours, which means that 12:45 in the afternoon I take the insulin, 1:15 I have my lunch. The calories in the lunch are gone away by about 4:30, but the insulin is still hanging around in the system, so I start feeling hungry. So by 4:35 I eat. That excess eating will cause some sort of weight gain, because you may not be able to bolus for that, because if you give another insulin injection, that may just accelerate this cycle. So therefore, so that's what human regular insulin does. So you have human analog insulin like aspart or a lispro. So these or glulysin, these insulins last for only 3 hours, so they take away the problem. The next level is insulin pump, which gives it in a more physiological manner. So the newer insulins have helped us in controlling weight in type 1 diabetes. That's, I said, the third aspect. But sometimes in some of my type 1 diabetes patients who are putting on a lot of weight, especially during adolescence, especially uh, women or ladies or girls, those people sometimes develop features of what we call polycystic ovarian syndrome. They also develop irregular periods,
Right.
hair growth. So I like to put them on a small dose of metformin. Now, metformin in type 1 diabetes is very controversial. It's complicated because metformin, the action of metformin is it's weight neutral. So you can manage with less doses of insulin. But remember, it can cause some degree of acidosis in the body. So
Mhm.
if you stop insulin and if they take metformin, it's a dangerous situation. So I always tell them that, okay, because your weight is going up and you're developing polycystic ovarian disease, I'm going to put you on a small dose of metformin along with insulin so that I can reduce the insulin. Insulin dose may not be that much, but do not skip the insulin and depend on metformin at any point of time. Years back, I had a patient like this who was putting on a lot of weight, and I had counseled her not to stop the insulin and to take metformin, but she was not to take metformin if you're not taking insulin. And I told her she should take both insulin and metformin. But what happened is she went on a picnic. And when she went on a picnic, she did not take the insulin or metformin with her. So
Oh.
maybe at those days, we are talking about 15, 16, almost 18 years back. And she did not want to highlight the fact that she had diabetes. And when she came back, uh, for some reason, there was some sort of hartal in the city, and all the medical shops were closed. Parents had gone out to work, and she reached home. She hadn't taken insulin for 2, 3 days. She suddenly came home and she couldn't find the insulin. She was feeling hungry. Of course, she didn't, I don't know if she took the metformin, she took pastries, and then she developed ketoacidosis and she was admitted. And of course, she recovered from that. That's when I saw her, and she recovered from that very well. She's doing very well now. But just a point to highlight that uh, giving metformin along with insulin is not always a very good option. Diet, lifestyle is always a better option. You need to carry your insulin kit with you. I'm sure everybody in the Blue Circle Foundation is extremely, aware of all these things. You take your insulin, take your glucometer, monitor. Don't be afraid of telling people you have type 1 diabetes. It's nothing. It's a very simple problem to be handled. So I think people, we should
Correct.
feel happy about disclosing that we have type 1 diabetes, and it's also an opportunity to be more healthy, eat on time, to take medicines, and to be more disciplined. So I think this is the message I'd like to give.
Just said is really important for the parents to know as well, because sometimes that guilt or that feeling of not disclosing starts in with the parents and then it flows down to the child. So for all the parents who are listening to this, please keep this in mind.
Right. And like at Blue Circle, we are very open about being vocal that you are type 1 diabetic. But we still see some people like who are skeptical about informing their peers or their colleagues, and we still see people who do not wish to carry insulin with them. I think the story that you just said was an apt example for everyone and a reminder that carrying your insulin and probably some snack with you is also an important thing for type 1 diabetics. Insulin lead to weight gain? And this is the questions that most parents ask. And they're worried that if we continuously keep on giving insulin to the child is going to gain weight over time. So, how much truth is there to this question, and how can we manage it?
Well, my answer may sound very simple for people who are in the Blue Circle Foundation, who are always aware about diabetes, but in its essence, if you look at the essence of type 1 diabetes, it's an endocrine disease where the insulin is not there in the body. So insulin is a hormone that has many effects. So because insulin is not there, we've got to just replace insulin. Unfortunately, insulin cannot be eaten or drunk because it gets digested, so it has to be injected. But we are not giving insulin on top of an already normal level of insulin. We are actually not even treating, we are replacing a deficiency. So if imagine if the insulin level is this much and the insulin level has come down this much, and all you're doing is giving enough insulin to give the normal level. So it's just a replacement, and a replacement cannot cause weight gain because of the lack of insulin, people lose weight, and when you replace that insulin as precisely as possible, you will gain that weight which you lost. But yes, because of the differences between the body's insulin pattern and the insulin injection pattern, there may be a little difference. The second reason why people might gain weight is when they get low sugars and then they keep on eating. So that has to be addressed by more precisely matching the carbs to the insulin, looking at the insulin carb ratio and giving it more precisely so that there's no leftover insulin in the system that people have to eat more. So that's more of a titration issue. That's what I feel. So the simple answer is, if insulin is replaced in the appropriate manner, with the appropriate tool, it will only replace your weight to your good weight and it won't cause additional weight gain. Of course, if you take too much insulin and eat too much food, then of course that may happen. Of course, I'd like to also mention one point is insulin is a lipogenic hormone. By lipogenic, I mean it causes fat deposition. So if you keep on injecting insulin in the same area, it will cause lipohypertrophy, and that's another form of fat accumulation. But that doesn't mean the insulin, the fat that accumulates is across the body. So that's a localized issue. And to prevent this lipohypertrophy, you'll have to keep on changing the sites of insulin injection.
Doctor, another very common question that a lot of young girls and women have is that they are putting on weight with type 1 and struggling with issues. So, what would you suggest to them? I know this is a general thing and not person specific, but what advice
So
would you
my
have?
first advice would be that if somebody is putting on weight with type 1 diabetes, remember about 20 to 25% of people with type 1 diabetes have a thyroid disease and have hypothyroidism. It's not, thyroid disease is not associated very commonly with other forms of diabetes, but with type 1 diabetes, especially an autoimmune type 1 diabetes where the body fights with its own pancreas, the same fight can happen with the thyroid as well. So it's very important. So whenever I see a person with type 1 diabetes who's putting on weight, I always check the thyroid functions. In fact, all type 1 diabetes subjects people should do an annual thyroid function test. And correcting the thyroid function test may not result in a very dramatic weight loss, maybe only 2-3 kilos less. But if you don't correct that hypothyroidism, whatever diet and exercise that you do, it will be futile. So correcting the hypothyroidism makes your lifestyle better. Second point I'd like to tell all type 1s who are putting on weight is to go and try and reduce your carbohydrate intake to the extent possible. Why do you want to lose weight? We've got to be comfortable with our body weight. See, losing weight is not a goal in itself from the health point of view. From the cosmetic point of view, I agree. Weight loss has got a meaning. You need to look, you need to have self confidence, you need to look smart. I understand that. But from a health point of view, putting on a little bit of weight, but if your blood glucose is okay, if you are healthy, you're able to do your daily tasks. So some of the people who check all the bells and whistles and who've done everything right, they follow a diet, they're exercising, they are taking their insulin on time, they're matching the carbohydrate intake. But doctor, see, I'm putting on weight, what to do? Well, sometimes that may be constitutional and you might need to accept it. And you might need to sometimes like yourself, like your body, and accept your body for what it is. And because not all obese people are unhealthy. There is a concept of fit but fat or metabolically healthy obesity. So if you've done everything right, if you still aren't losing weight, but if you feel healthy, if you're just a little plump, I think it's also time to question yourself as to why you want to lose that.
A tweet from a few days ago, about obesity and stigma. It's very important to address that. And I think you've done that wonderfully here. It's not necessary to chase a number on the scale, if you're constitutionally a little plump, like you said, but you're healthy overall, that's fine. Maybe you need to change the way that you're looking at yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Who come to me with questions like the kid probably sometimes overdoses so that they can go in hypo and then they can have their favorite sweets, and this is leading to weight gain. So like this mental health aspect, especially with the kids, like since they want to eat the sweets or like their favorite chocolate or anything, they overdose and then they don't realize that this can lead to weight gain and further complications.
I don't know if it's a very medical suggestion, but my suggestion is a little philosophical. Whatever we don't get, we have a craving for that. For example, there are things I liked, I never got in my childhood. For example, when I was growing as a child, cashew nuts were very expensive and I never used to get cashew nuts. So even today, whenever I see cashew nut, oh, I want to eat that. So I really like that. So I have some fascination for that. Similarly, when a type 1 diabetes subject is deprived, a child is deprived of an occasional treat, that's when the craving really builds up. So I think it's very important for parents to realize that an occasional treat is a good thing. I'm not even saying that it's allowed. It's obviously not just allowed, it's something very important in the life of a type 1 diabetes person, because may not, craving is craving, whether it's for food or whether it's for a game or whether it's for reading a book or whether it's seeing a movie. So sometimes you'll find that satisfying some craving is also good enough for the child. So some other form of happiness, like buy the child a toy or buy a book, that it's I have found it in children very commonly, and this has been my advice to all the parents. And of course, that's exactly the good work you're doing in Blue Circle Foundation, highlighting this.
Thank you, doctor. That really reiterates for me as well personally, because I also, having grown up as a child with type 1 diabetes, I don't know, there's some complex relationship with food, that I'm beginning to understand now after so many years. And I tend to stress eat, even though I'm very particular about what I eat, and even though I might stress eat on something low carb and not so called, like a cake or pastry. But I understand that that is not healthy behavior, and I then maybe try to distract myself by going down for a jog or doing something else, like you said, non-food related things make a difference as well.
Absolutely, I think that's very important.
Basically, a major cause for type 2 diabetes.
Well, I think obesity is an important cause of type 2 diabetes. Now, there was a study in Sweden, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So, they found that there were diabetes was what we know as type 2 diabetes is also several types. And in one type, which is called severe insulin resistant diabetes, of course, there is some degree of obesity, and these people are people may be at risk of kidney disease. They found that type 2 diabetes itself could be divided into five types. And another type is uh, type 2 diabetes, which occurs, a milder form of type 2 diabetes, which may occur with severe obesity, which they said may not be related that much to complications. So there are different types of obesity. On one hand, you have obesity, which is associated with high sugar, high cholesterol, blood pressure, heart disease. On the other side, there is a very metabolically healthy obesity, which may not really be associated with problem. Some people have found out that wherever the obesity is in the abdomen, that area, that obesity is more likely to cause type 2 diabetes. So, yes, the abdominal obesity is related to type 2 diabetes. And when I look at abdominal obesity, I'm not talking about the paunch, not necessarily the paunch, but it's also the fat which is present inside the abdomen, near the stomach and intestines. So, that fat is related to obesity. So, yes, the short answer is central abdominal fat is related to type 2 diabetes.
They come in terms with this term that we call as pre-diabetic phase. So, and the doctor suggests that once you start losing weight, then you can probably reverse it. So, and I read somewhere in the newspaper that at this point, like when a person is supposedly in the pre-diabetic phase of it, and they reduce certain percentage of body fat, they can reverse type 2 diabetes. So, how much truth is there in this statement?
So if you look at pre-diabetes, it's a condition similar to what we discussed overweight. It's when the HbA1c, the HbA1c is a 3 monthly average of blood glucose levels, but we use it for diagnosing diabetes. If the HbA1c is 6.5 or above, we say it's diabetes. If the HbA1c falls between 5.7 to 6.4, so 5.7 to 6.4 is a pre-diabetes range, which means the blood sugar is high, but not high enough to cause diabetes. Now, pre-diabetes three things can happen. Either that person can remain in pre-diabetes, either that person can revert to normal sugars, HbA1c, or that person can progress to type 2 diabetes. So the chances are roughly the same for each of the three happening. But yes, if somebody has pre-diabetes and is obese, just a 4-5% weight loss can cause them to reverse to normal blood glucose levels and can prevent them to progression of diabetes. Now, I just want to add that while the ideal goal of pre-diabetes is that they reverse to normal blood glucose levels, even if they remain in pre-diabetes without progressing to diabetes, that's a fair enough goal because type 2 diabetes or diabetes has been associated with complications, not pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes, some people think that the heart attack risk is higher, but really there's no data out there to show that. So again, a low carb diet may help people with pre-diabetes prevent type 2 diabetes. And studies have shown that just 15 to 20 minutes of, you don't have to do big time exercise. If you can just say walk for 15-20 minutes a day and cut down on your carbohydrate intake, increase your fiber intake, you can prevent pre-diabetes from turning into type 2 diabetes.
Management and diabetes, a small part is also about people who are not able to gain as much weight. And in a lot of cases, parents of children are pretty worried about that aspect. And, they wonder if there's a specific diet or certain supplements, or how do they make sure that their child is on the right track?
So, very important question. that, if we are talking about type 1 diabetes children, if they if they start losing a lot of weight and they uh, start becoming very thin, then some people look at celiac disease as a possibility. Now, celiac disease does exist in India, though it's very, very rare. And we do screen for celiac disease with antibodies, but usually we do not find them to be positive. Of course, if celiac disease is positive, you require diet control. So that's a very rare possibility. I don't want to our parents with type 1 diabetes to be concerned or worried about it. All I want to emphasize here is that if the child height is all right, then that means nutritionally the child is relatively okay. And if the child is studying well, academically sound, physically active, playing, then forget about that weight. If the child is always feeling weak and tired and not being able to run around and play as before, then you've got a problem. Then you need to look for common causes like anemia in children, for example, and some of those basic tests you may have to do. But more or less, if the child's height is okay, that means the child's nutrition is generally okay. That means there's generally no endocrine disease or severe disease out there, and you can just follow up the child because type 1 diabetes, uh, by their nature, many of them are thin because, as I said, insulin is a hormone which helps to put on fat in the body. So maybe that leanness is a loss of fat, and that may be not a bad thing at all. So, show a doctor. But if your child is height is normal, playing well, studying well, don't give it another thought.
They are more concerned about supplements or what sort of drinks, like when we talk about the Bonvita or like other things that are largely available in the markets. So any supplement suggestions for growing kids, is it necessary?
My personal view is that there's no need for any supplements because if your child is drinking milk, for example, that gives you a lot of nutrition if the child needs to grow up with. That gives you calcium, that gives you carbs, that gives you proteins, that gives you fat. So that gives you everything, including big nutrients that you need and the micronutrients that you need. And if you have a very diverse meal plan, which includes different foods, fruits, and vegetables of different colors, then it will give you almost every vitamin and mineral that you need. So yes, if the child is eating well, or if the person with diabetes is eating well, you don't need to give supplements. Supposing you have a situation where, for example, it's more common in type 2 diabetes, where someone is on a very, very calorie restricted diet, somebody is very old and not able to eat food properly. That's a situation where we might like to supplement with some vitamin or mineral tablets. I do not recommend any particular health drink for children with diabetes.
Affect the rest of the body. We've been speaking about obesity and diabetes, but maybe its effect on bones, nerves, other things. And would you think that in certain cases, bariatric surgery is an option as well? So, two parts to the
So I
question.
think the effects of obesity may be three. One is mechanical, second is metabolic, third is the mind. So three M's: metabolic, mechanical, mind. So what are the first? Let's look at the metabolic. Metabolic means to do with the body's metabolism. So what are the, you have diabetes, you have high cholesterol, you have high blood pressure. In type 2 diabetes people, you have a high risk of heart disease. In type 1 diabetes, there's not that much risk. So these are the metabolic problems. Liver, obesity means some fat is also stored in the liver. So you have fatty liver, what we call fatty liver disease. So these are some of the metabolic consequences. Then we look at the mechanical consequences. One important mechanical consequence is on the knees. A lot of obese people, especially older people with type 2 diabetes, because of their weight, they have osteoarthritis and joint pains in the knees, which needs to be addressed. And the other mechanical thing is in the thighs and the armpits, they may get fungal infection because obese people, the skin rubs, and there they may get itching and they may get fungal infections, which may need to. So these are some of the common mechanical. And the third is, of course, the mind. And obese people, as you mentioned, the relationship with food is very complex for every individual, and it's more so for obese people because they're always thinking of if they eat too much, they feel guilty. If they eat less, they feel hungry. So, and of course, many people with obesity, especially severe obesity, are depressed not because depression is causing the obesity. Obesity is contributing to depression. Sometimes the medicines that are given for depression also cause, for mental disorders also cause obesity. So these are things to look at. So these are the important, relationships with obesity. So it happens throughout the body. Another example of mechanical is, snoring that happens while sleeping, called obstructive sleep apnea. Can be easily corrected by weight loss. So next we come to bariatric surgery. I see a lot of people who are obese, but who are continuing to take tablets and insulin and other medicines and remaining obese and continuing to have high blood glucose levels. So I'm talking obviously about type 2 diabetes. And when that happens, I'm talking in general about adults. When the body mass index is more than 35 and you are struggling with glucose control and diabetes, and the degree of obesity is a body mass index of more than 35, that's a time when they should go for bariatric surgery. Uh, of course, they say that in Indians you could consider bariatric surgery at lower levels, but this is an international guideline. So very simply, bariatric surgery is of two types. One is that you cut the stomach and make it into a sleeve, a smaller stomach. So that's a mechanical thing, because the stomach is small, you eat less and you feel full. For example, if you eat maybe 3 spoons of, say, a biryani, you will feel as if you've eaten 2 big bowls of biryani. You'll feel full quickly. That's also because the surgery done removes the bad side of the stomach. The bad side of stomach makes some bad hormones which cause hunger and make you to feel sedentary. So when you remove the bad part, your hunger goes away, you feel more active, and the mechanical restriction. So that's one type of bariatric surgery called sleeve gastrectomy. Another type of surgery is called a bypass. That means whenever you eat food, the food is, instead of, you have a road highway and you can take a detour to some other shortcut and reach the same place. So the stomach is connected to the intestine. So the food, instead of going through all the intestines, it will quickly transit uh, uh, to the rest of to the end part of the intestine. So it will, without getting digested, it will not get absorbed and it will go out. So food without getting digested, it will go through the stool. So you will lose weight. I'm trying to make it very simple. So that's called a bypass. So modern surgeries are a mixture of the cutting the stomach and the bypass together. So some people call it the mini gastric bypass, which is now a very popular mechanism, way of bariatric surgery. Again, to highlight, diet and exercise are the key to managing diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Most type 2 diabetes can be managed with medicines, injections, where you are not able to reach targets, and when people are unhealthy and getting complications and are very obese, bariatric surgery may be an option.
Way that you explained it made it very, very simple. And I'm sure, it's a really complex thing overall. But so I'm going to pick up on the last M, which Doctor mentioned, the mind. And I quickly want to tell everyone about the Blue Circle Buddy Project, which is an online psychosocial helpline wherein we've got 13 volunteers speaking 8 Indian languages. And Dr. Unikrishnan and the team at Chelaram trained us on diabetes. So while we are all people already living with diabetes, to also be able to talk to people and support them emotionally and guide them, we've got a lot of support from Dr. Unikrishnan and his team. So thank you, Doctor, once again. And I'm going to link in the helpline into the description box of this interview. So if anybody feels like they want to give us a call and chat with a buddy, you're more than welcome to schedule a call with any of us.
Thank you. I think it's a very valuable project, the Buddies project, and I really appreciate the work you are doing. And as an endocrinologist and on behalf of the Chelaram Diabetes Institute, we are very proud and happy to be a partner for such a unique project where you have used what in medicine we call as the peer group. So we have our friends with diabetes, type 1 and type 2 diabetes, who are reaching out to everybody with the larger population of diabetes. And there can be nothing more unique than that, because the empathy comes naturally. And also, it has been started at a time where the world is in the midst of a pandemic and people are feeling the problems of loneliness and solitude and being cut off from the rest of the society. And there can be no better time to have started this. And we congratulate you for that. And we are happy to be a partner on behalf of the Chelaram Diabetes Institute.
Thank you so guiding
Thank you.
us. We are very grateful for you supporting us and guiding us through launching this project. So when it comes to weight loss and terms like that, and the marketing that goes around us is liposuction, and people are very openly going and doing it without understanding the what it comes around with. So what is your suggestion or thought process on that?
Well, I think liposuction is a largely cosmetic procedure. It actually sucks out the fat from under the skin, largely. So, as I mentioned earlier, the obesity that is linked to type 2 diabetes is essentially within the abdomen. It is your mental fat, the abdominal fat, and to a lesser degree, the fat under the skin. Whereas liposuction just sucks out the fat under the skin. So it's a very good cosmetic procedure for improving appearance. So if somebody would like to have a very short-term weight loss for a particular reason, could be acting in a movie, for example, somebody would like to lose weight for that purpose to take on a particular role. That liposuction could have a role. Second is the cosmetic aspect. People want to, but remember, liposuction is a very temporary procedure, and most of the people get the weight back. Liposuction does have some risks like fat embolism. Fat can get clogged into the blood vessels, but really, with modern techniques, the risk of these fat embolism and all are minimal. But really, the benefit is not there. So, if I look at a person with obese person with say type 2 diabetes, I'm not looking at why this person should lose weight is for the medical reason to reduce the risk of diabetes, hypertension, and liposuction just improves the cosmetic appearance. So it should be looked upon as a cosmetic procedure. I don't encourage it.
Asked Dr. Unikrishnan a lot of questions, including a lot of the questions that we received from the community members as well. And we'd like to thank you once again, Doctor, for taking out the time and doing this with us. A lot of people are looking forward to seeing this video, and I hope it answers everybody's questions. So, from all of us here at Blue Circle, Dr. Unikrishnan, thank you very much, and have a
Thank
good
you,
day,
and it was a
everyone.
pleasure to work with you on this discussion. I take this opportunity to wish both of you, everybody at the Blue Circle Foundation, and also all the people with diabetes and non-diabetes in general to have good health and happiness in the pandemic and also the post-pandemic period. So I'm sure things are going to get better and wish everybody all the best.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you for taking the time out and having this discussion with us. And I'm pretty sure it has helped the audience, both people living with diabetes and even without diabetes. This discussion was very insightful. Thank you so much for doing this with us.